is two separate things. Girlfriend, boyfriend, relationship.
So we are familiar with him. I've seen his videos before. Him giving input on how men should treat women.
I could call up right now and say, hey, what's up? How you doing? How's work? I'm going to tell you what's on my mind, what I think about globally, global, local.
It's that time again where we ask the question, what's on Edigga's mind? Tune in as he talks about what's trending, celebrity news, community and political views, and so much more. So get ready to hear what's going on with your host, the man you all know and love, Edigga.
The views that are expressed on What's on Edigga's Mind is that of the show creator and not Charm City Direct TV Network. Some language, videos, and content may not be suitable for young viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hey everybody, you are tuned into What's on Edigga's Mind. Now you can see that I am not Edigga, but trust and believe he is not somewhere tied down in the back, all hostage situation. He has given me the authority to come and be a guest host on today's episode. I am Lilac Calandra, and we actually met in a Black podcasting group. I'm so honored and appreciative of being given this opportunity to share, to encourage, and to talk about a super important topic. So when Edigga was mentioning the topic of, what we'll be speaking about today, or what he wanted this episode to surround around, it was about God speaking and are we listening? There was an amazing singer on Facebook. I mean, she was singing the house down, but above her voice being excellent, the words that she was singing were straight from God. And Edigga said it best. He said God was pouring into her and she was able to pour into us. For anyone who was listening and paying attention, God is always speaking. Are we listening? So look, I have a few bullet points of some things that happens when we can't hear from God, how we hear from God, some disruptions or distractions that go on that make it so that we're not able to kind of tune in to what's going on. Now, look, I'm a preacher, right? So I'm going to keep it within the time frame, and I'm not going to keep saying, oh, I'm going to close and then not close. We're just going to have this communication about what happens when God speaks. And then sometimes we can't hear him, or when we hear him and we don't like what he says. There's a whole bunch of different things that go on. So I actually want to open with a scripture. Comes from 2 Kings 6:17, and it's before what happened. Elisha, he was, with his servant, and there was some issues going on. There were like some enemies coming, and his servant was so afraid and so scared and so worried, and he's like, there are more of them than us. And Elisha prayed to God, and here's what the scripture said. Elisha prayed, open his eyes, Lord, so that he may see. Then the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he looked and saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. So what does that mean? Sometimes we need to have our eyes open so that we can see what God is saying. We need to have our ears open so that we can hear what God is saying. The servant was only looking at the physical aspect. He counted how many of his team was there and how many of the enemy's team was there. And by all rights, the enemy had way more people. There were so many of them. They filled up all the hills. But Elisha, he said, I see something that you're not seeing. Why? Because the servant wasn't tapped into the frequency. So let's go back to the video of the woman singing. She's singing this beautiful and amazing song about overcoming and being cast down and being persecuted but not destroyed, which comes right from scripture. People sometimes might have just been focused on her voice, but are we hearing what God is saying? He has given us encouragement in this time that even though we're going through racial things are going on, we're still in a pandemic, but he is going to bring us through. So now it becomes a song of encouragement, whereas we're listening to her voice and people might even been emotional and crying, but let's not miss the message because God is always speaking. Oh, he always has something amazing to say. If we pray, if we ask God to reveal, he'll show us where he is and what he is in, just like Elisha prayed for the servant. So after Elisha prayed, the servant saw all of the heavenly hosts and the chariots of fire. And then the tides turned because they had more members than their enemies. So it's like when we take a moment and we figure out maybe there's a distraction, maybe there's something going on and blocking us from hearing what God is saying. Again, He is always speaking. All right, so I have 7 bullet points. 7 is my favorite number. It is a divine number. So I have 7 bullet points that we're just going to walk through. Sometimes we can't hear God speaking for a multitude of reasons. There are many things that happen. We have so many things going on. Oh my gosh, we're watching TV, we're on the phone, we're on social media, our phones are glued to our hands. Sometimes those things are interrupters where we cannot hear from God because we are just not in a space to hear from Him. So the first bullet point I'm having is we don't like what He says. That's why we can't hear from God, right? He'll tell us something, or He'll use someone to tell us something, and we don't like what was said, right? It goes against our will. It goes against our plan and what we want to do. It will stretch us. It will challenge us in ways that we don't want to be stretched or challenged. So we discard it. Like, oh God, what did you say? Like if our mom is calling us and we hear her, come on, we've all done that. We hear our mom, but we don't answer because we know she's about to ask us to get the remote, get a glass of water, come change the channel, come sweep up, come do this boatload of dishes. It's only 3 bowls that are in the sink right now. We ignore the voice because we know that we're not doing that God, we're not doing something that God told us to do, or He told us to do something and we just don't like it. Maybe He's stretching us in a way that we don't want to be stretched. He's encouraging us to do something to fulfill our purpose, and we have become complacent and we are scared and we are afraid and fearful and we don't want to do it. So He's speaking, we hear Him talking, we know that He's speaking to us, but because of the content of what He's saying, we do not acknowledge it, and we're like, oh no, I didn't hear God say that. So that's one of the reasons why it's like we have to be so aware that we're not ignoring the voice of God. God is speaking. Are we listening? Are we in a position to listen? If someone is way across a field and they're yelling, you cannot make out what they're saying until we get into a closer proximity. We have to be at a close proximity to God to hear what He's saying. And then we could pick up, oh my gosh, I saw a bird flying and I heard a bird chirping. I hear God in that. I heard a baby say something. I heard a little toddler speak something and it sparked something. God is speaking in that way. You could be reading a book outside of the Bible or any spiritual or religious thing. It could be a fictional book, a non-fictional book, and we see God right in the pages because He's everywhere. Are we in close enough proximity to hear what He's saying? Are we close enough to understand and decipher and comprehend what He's saying? Going down, I mentioned this before. We are sometimes, all the time, most times, often, frequently, all those words. We're too busy. We have so much going on. Our plate is not just full, it is overflowing. And it is good to be in a place of overflow. And oh my gosh, we want our cups to overflow and all that. But the plate's overflowing, not so much, because all our food mixes up. So all our activities and everything we're doing mixes up on our plate, and we really can't eat one thing because now we're trying to sample everything. We're being stretched too thin. We are too busy to hear from God. And so in the church world, sometimes people are too busy doing the work of God to hear from God. I'm like, what? This doesn't even make sense. I've been there where I'm so busy. I'm working with the youth. I'm singing in the choir. I'm serving on the ministerial staff. I'm doing all this stuff that I'm like, oh God, hold on. I'm doing your work. I can't talk to you right now, or I can't hear from you right now. Hold on. Just a second. I'll be right there doing His work for Him, but we can't hear Him because we're too busy. So the question really is, and this is our moment to really take a second to say, what is it that I need to take off my plate, right? There's places on our plate that are allotted for certain things. We're supposed to fulfill our purpose, accomplish our goals, and do what we need to do to succeed. I just combined the word. I'm trademarking that. So we have to succeed and excel and move and push together. There are things that we are supposed to do. Other times, people will put stuff on our plate that we are really not supposed to be carrying. So how do we get unbusy enough to hear from God? We make those proper boundaries where it's like, I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to take a pause to say, I really can't do this right now. I just had to do that with my mom. We have a family business, right? and I am the social media person. We're doing a podcast, we do lives, we do this, we post every day. I said, Mom, I need some help with this. If you send me the content, I'll post it. I can't be creating content and posting it. It's about creating proper and healthy boundaries and really having an honest conversation. Most people, if they love you, will say, oh, okay, I get it. I understand you can't do that right now. That's fine. We'll notice that when we're freed up, we have the ability to breathe and sit and hear from God. Our ears are unstopped. Sometimes all the stuff that's going on dulls our senses where we can't hear. We kind of hear a faint thing, but we can't hear. It's like, the radio. Well, I don't know if it does it now because it's all digital, but back in the day, you had to tune that radio up. You would hear it kind of fuzzy. And then the more you would tune that dial, you started hearing it clearer and clearer. And often, sometimes when you're driving, this is another proximity issue. When you're driving, that radio station will start to fade out until you go back closer to the station. We have to go back closer to the station of God so we can hear Him and make sure that the radio of God is tuned in, that we can hear His frequency, that it's not fuzzy, it's not distant, it doesn't sound like want, 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 like Charlie Brown. Like we're hearing and understanding, okay, I'm hearing clearly because I'm not as busy. I've set my boundaries and I need that space and time for myself. Look, I'm a guru of self-care. I am a huge proponent of taking the time to breathe. Self-care isn't just going to Hawaii. It is sitting at home with a nice cup of tea or coffee or whatever, with a nice book, putting on some music and taking the time to hear from God, to be in the space. Are we prepared? Are we in the right space to hear from God? We're hearing. Are we listening? Are our ears tuned in to listen? Oftentimes not, because we're busy, because our plate is too full. We have to start clearing our plate, clearing our shoulders off so we can take time for ourselves. I posted a post last week. The highest form of self-love, the highest form of our love to ourselves is how we take care of ourselves. The highest form of love we give to others is how we take care of ourselves. If we're so busy and run down and tired and all over the place, we can't even help those we have been assigned to help. We can't even do anything else because we're so run down and burnt out. It's time to start clearing the things off of our plate. We're starting just to take what we need and what we have. It's not being selfish. We can still help people, but when it becomes too much and when we don't have the time to hear from God, we are missing out on key things. It is very dangerous not to be able to hear from God, especially in this time. He's speaking. Are we in the proper position? Have we tilled our ground to prepare to hear from God? Just like a farmer goes and tills the ground, gets it ready to plant and harvest, have we been prepared to hear from God? So important that we make sure we're not too busy. We're saying, whoop, I can't do that right now. This is something that I'm not able to do, having the clear and honest conversations. Next on the list, oh, well, I already talked about it, is are we tapped into His frequency? I just mentioned about the radio. Are we tapped into His frequency that we can hear clearly? We don't want to hear halfway what He's saying. He's always speaking. We sometimes hear like a muffled version or like half of what He's saying, and then we go off of that. There's a danger in not hearing fully what God is saying. We don't get the full concept. We don't get the full statement. So we get maybe 2 or 3 words out of a 10-word sentence. Those 7 words that we missed, and because our frequency wasn't tuned in right, that could be detrimental to our health, to our family, to our coworkers, to everyone around us, because we are not operating fully in what God has told us to say or do or act or move or shift. Come on, we got to tune that dial. Go ahead, if you want to, you could just go ahead and tune your dial. Make sure that we're hearing from God, right? So we're eliminating all the spaces and places that would make us not hear from God. We are going to acknowledge that sometimes we don't like what He says. Let's be honest. We don't like what He says. It's like, oh, I don't really want to do that. God said it. Let's do it. He will never steer us wrong. He loves us, right? And then we're making sure that our radio is tuned in, tapped in. We have the clearest frequency ever. You know what? I was born in '88, and I still remember when those old TVs, you had to take a hanger and get that frequency together because it was kind of snowy. It was kind of unclear. It was a little foggy. The more you twisted that hanger, okay, you put it right on the TV, and it would channel everything down. Some of us, most of us, or even all of us need to take that hanger that in a technical way and say, I'm going to tune this frequency so I can hear. You know what I mean? If you got to tap the TV, sometimes it was foggy, it was like going up and down, you got to tap it. You got to be close enough where we can take things and shift and make sure that we're hearing it definitely from God. And it's good to hear from pastors, preachers, and prophets. That's awesome. That's amazing. That's wonderful. But we can hear God for ourselves if we're tapped in, if we're tuned into the right frequency. So if y'all need to take that hanger and refigure it and twist it up and move it around to make sure that we're hearing right, that's what we have to do in this season. Here's the admonition in this season. Oh my, we do not want to just be getting half of what God is saying or a few words, and then we have to kind of make up the rest, because our minds, we could add on something that is not the accurate way to go. So we want to make sure that we're tapped in properly and tapped in right, so that we're hearing everything clearly, 100%, not 90%. There's an old song in church, 99 and a half won't do. We don't want 99 and a half, because that half, we're missing out on some things that's dangerous if we're not hearing the full thing. So I can see people just reconfiguring their little hangers and getting that thing together so that this TV is clear, so that the radio frequency is right booming in our ears. And then sometimes we are not able to hear from God because we don't respect or acknowledge the vessel that he is using. I'm like, ooh, when I was writing my little bullet points, God was just giving me some things of why we're not able to really hear from him. He's always speaking. That's what he says. I'm always speaking. God is always speaking. There was one time that was recorded that God didn't speak for 400 years. It's that time between the Old Testament and the New Testament, right? So that last book, all the way up until when Jesus was born, it was dead silent. I don't want to be in a space where God is not speaking, because he gives us direction, he gives us clarity and focus so that we can move and grow and build and connect and network with who we need to network with. So outside of that time, God has always been speaking. There was dead silence. Prophets weren't getting anything. It was silent. We don't want to be in that space again. And sometimes when someone is used by God to speak, we do not respect the vessel, so we can't even hear him in that, right? I don't know about you, but I have heard an amazing sermon from a homeless man who was drunk. You could smell the alcohol in him. I'm being so serious. You could smell the alcohol coming from his pores. That man was preaching the word of God. I had to tune my ears in to listen. I had to exclude and ignore his outwardly appearance. And if I was putting myself above him, oh, he's a homeless man, what does he know? God can use any vessel. Are we humble enough? I don't want to step on anyone's toes, but are we humble enough to hear the vessel that God is using? It could be anyone. Sometimes we discredit even our family members because we're still keeping them in their past, right? Some of our family members might have been drug addicts or alcoholics or out doing their own thing. Now they might be trying to turn their life around, or God could be using them to give you encouragement or say something. We dare not miss what God is saying because we have elevated ourselves above someone. Oh my gosh, God can use anyone. He can use a 1-year-old. He can use a 90-year-old. He can use anyone. So like I said, a homeless man, he could use someone who's out on the streets now. Anyone he wants to use, he can use. Anyone who's available to him, he can use. But sometimes it's like, oh, I can't hear from them because look at what they did, or look at what they're in now. I can't hear from them. We miss out big time, majorly, because we have looked at the physical appearance. The Bible says that God looks at the heart. Man looks at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. Are we seeing the heart of this vessel? So God is speaking. He is talking. He is saying something through this person. But we, in our humanity, in our pride, in our elevation and haughtiness, we can't even hear what this person is saying because it's them. It's that person. And God could be using them to speak a word over our life and encouragement. Oh my gosh, giving us something so amazing. But we have missed the opportunity because we're looking at the person because it's our little sister, or it's because it's our sibling who is not doing what's right, or because it's someone that we consider lesser than us, right? That we consider way low on the totem pole. So, heaven forbid, we can't hear from them because, they're just not on our level. We've elevated ourselves. They're not on our status. There's a danger in that, in looking at the vessel and missing God. Again, God is always speaking. I have to have said that about 100 times. That's the topic. God is always speaking. Are we listening? If He's speaking through someone else that we have not deemed worthy of hearing from, then we are missing hearing what He is saying. If we have discarded someone based on their past, based on what they did to us, based on what they're in now, based on what they're currently doing, then we are missing the opportunity to hear from God. He speaks everywhere and in everything. He could use anything. We don't put God in a box. We don't limit Him to just speaking through the things that we normally see Him in. And another thing that really keeps us from hearing from God is that this is the segue. We put God in a box. We do not allow Him to do things in a supernatural way, in an extraordinary way. God isn't some genie. This isn't Aladdin where you rub a lamp and it's like, give me 3 wishes. This is God, the creator of the universe, the creator of heaven and earth, the creator of us. This is God. So we can't, ascribe or prescribe Him to the normal things that we're used to doing. He can do whatever He wants and use whatever He wants. We dare not put Him in a box, and we dare not limit Him to what we're comfortable with. I always say that in our moments of uncomfortability, God speaks the loudest. When we have to step out of what we know, what we're familiar with, that's when God says, okay, at the end of you is where I begin. There's too much of you in here that I can't even speak. You're doing too much talking. You're having too much say that I can't even speak or say anything. So when you reduce, then I'll increase. This is what God says to us, where we are taking the time to make sure that we have not put Him in this container and you sit on this shelf, and when I need you, I'll take you out, and when I'm in trouble, that's when I'll speak to you. And that, no. That we are in constant communication with God, that He is our friend, that He knows us, and that we are always in His face, and that we don't say, oh, because He did it that time, that's how He always is gonna speak to me. No, He can speak in whatever way He wants, however He wants to speak, and whatever He wants to say. We dare not limit Him, because then we miss out. God is speaking. Are we listening? When He speaks, can we hear Him? Do we have Him contained and locked up and boxed up so much that we can't even hear what He's saying when He's speaking? Are we able to discern what He's saying? Sometimes no, because of our own familiarity, because of our own comfortability, because we're too afraid to experience the voice of God in an unknown way. He can literally use any vessel, any tool, anything He wants. But in our limited brain, in our mind capacity that we've kept so small at times, we say, oh no, that can't be God. That can't be God. No, that can't be God, because He usually says it this way. No, He can say whatever way He wants, especially during this time. He spoke during the pandemic when people were dying and sick and everyone was in fear and panic. I heard God the most. And those who were tapped into His frequency were able to really hear His voice. And He let us know not to be afraid. And that this was the time for people to launch into careers that we should have been launched into, that we're not working for the man anymore. We're not doing corporate America anymore. The pandemic freed us and gave us the liberty. God spoke in the pandemic. His voice boomed. It was so loud. But because of our own emotions, because of our own feelings, did we have Him in a box? Because we didn't want to be uncomfortable in a moment. Did we keep Him out, or shut Him down, or turn the volume down, or even press the mute on God? My Lord, have we ever muted God and said, okay, this might be you, but I'm too afraid, I'm too scared to even discern that is you. It might be you, but I'm in my own stuff right now that I can't even know if it's you, because I'm so afraid. And that just segues right into my next thing, where our own emotions and feelings can stop us at times from hearing from God. When God speaks, are we listening? Are our feelings and emotions clogging up our ears so we can't even hear from God? Are we so anxious, so depressed, so in grief, so fearful, so angry, so unforgiving that we cannot hear from God? Are our own things blocking the path from His voice to our ears? At times, yeah. There's so much going on. Oh my gosh, so much happening that our own emotions are all up and down, unregulated. The levels are just rising and falling in high volumes. We saw so much mental things happening during the pandemic, during our life, and still going on high increases of anxiety and suicide and all of these things that are pressuring us. It's like we're this one little ball and all these arrows are coming down. All of our feelings are just raining down on us when we get a moment to settle, when we get a moment to just chill. We can know that we have the hand on the dial, that our emotions and feelings are controlling us. We're going to turn them down enough that we can hear from God. Sometimes our emotions and feelings act like a gate. They are a gate and they block out the voice of God. They block out what He's trying to do, where He's trying to move us, where He's trying to shift us, because we're just in our own feelings. We're doing our own thing. We're so focused on self that we're like, no, I don't have time to hear, or I'm not even in a position or a place or space to hear because I'm mad. I'm anxious. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. I'm trying to control this. The control. Oh my gosh, when we try to control everything, how can we hear from God if we're trying to be in control? There's only one who can be in control. If it's us, then it's not Him. If it's Him, then it's not us. It's not a co-pilot. We're not sharing the steering wheel with God. Either we're letting Him steer this ship, drive this car, fly this plane, whatever method of transportation you want to use. You can even call it a submarine if you want. Whatever is being used as our mode of transportation, if He is steering it, if He is speaking, if He is moving, then we're the ones chilling in the back, waiting for His voice, waiting so we can hear Him. But sometimes we want to take the wheel. And really, in all honesty, we usually drive that car off a cliff or sink that submarine, or something happens. The wheel will blow off the bus. Something will happen where it's like we are in a destructive pattern because we're in our own feelings, because we're in control. Everybody has to be in control. And that could stem from a lot of different things. Where we were controlled when we were children. So we made an inner vow, I'm never going to be controlled again. We block God when we try to be in control. So we take a moment. We take a moment to say, God, I want to hear from you. Saturate me and prepare me to hear from you. How do we do that? And this is my favorite thing. We do that through mindfulness and meditation, where we are sitting and we are just in a quiet space and we're saying, God, I want to hear from you. Even in prayer, most times, who's the one talking? Us. God, I need this. Lord, I need help with this. Lord, can you give me this? My family's not acting right. My son's acting up. My daughter's acting crazy. We're the ones speaking. So it becomes just a one-way conversation. But even in prayer, in every aspect of our life, when we're done talking, we need to prepare ourselves to hear from God. Mindfulness and meditation really allows us to do that. In the pandemic, I became a mindfulness life coach. Listen, what black girl becomes a mindfulness life coach? This one, because mindfulness is a gift where we can take a moment and be present right where we are in every situation. If that's a walk outside, if that's listening to the rain, if that's just hearing how your hands, feel or sound tapping on a counter, we're sitting present in the moment so that we can hear from God. We give ourselves a chance to kind of bring our emotions down, turn the volume up of God's voice so that we can actually hear Him. If we need help with that regulation, if we need the space and the liberty to go ahead and kind of just take a break, all these things that I listed help us to take that break. We're setting our boundaries. We're making sure that we're clearly communicating what we can do. For what? For self-care, to make sure that we're not missing the voice of God. He's giving out instruction. He's giving out divine insight. He's telling us stop things. We don't have to go to any other person. God reveals and shows and directs, and we hear everything from Him if we're in a position to hear when God speaks. Are we listening? And are we in a space to listen? Are we in a space to hear? Do we have our ears prepared to listen to what God is saying? Mindfulness helps with that meditative state where we're not sitting on a mountain saying, but we are just in a chill position. We're bringing our body levels down. You can play music. You can listen to guided meditation. There's so many tools out there to just sit and meditate. And in those spaces, our mouths aren't running. We're making sure that our minds not are turned off, but that they're focused. So if a thought is coming in, right, you don't say, no. You have the thought come in and then you just redirect it back out. Like waves are lapping on the shore. That's what happens when a thought comes in when you're in a meditative or mindfulness state. You let it come in and then you push it back out. You don't expound on it like, oh, I got to go get dog food and this is how I'm going to go do it. And I'm afraid I don't have enough money. Nope. You let the thought come in and then you let it go right back out. Literally see that as waves of the ocean coming in and coming out so that we are making sure that we're open and available to hear from God when he speaks. Are we listening? Are we listening? He's always talking. He's always there with us. He's always there with us. I want to read another scripture that really speaks to this too. It's found in the book of Psalm. And King David, hello, I want to give him his just due. King David, in Psalm 139:8, he's mentioning there was a struggle sometimes hearing from God. He was in a lot of stuff. If you read up on him, I mean, he was in a lot. He cheated with someone else's wife and then had the husband killed. I mean, there was a lot that he was doing. But always in the Bible, it says that David was a man after God's heart. So no matter what he did, he always took the time to listen. And in this verse, it says, if I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. God is everywhere. And if he's there, then he's always speaking. So where God is, his voice is. And so are we close enough to hear him? Are we able to properly see him and be in close proximity and know that he's speaking? Or are we trying to say, what did you say? Come on, let's get closer. How do we get closer? We can get closer in prayer. Oh my gosh, we can read our Bible. We can connect with some amazing people where we could talk about things of God and just being in righteousness and love and joy and peace. That's the currency of God. He doesn't deal in coins and dollar bills. He deals in joy and peace and gentleness. Oh my gosh, and faithfulness. That's what he does. And so when we surround ourselves with those things, the voice of God becomes so much more clear that we can hear him and that our radio frequencies are all tapped in and tuned in. And it's like, oh, I don't have to try to guess what he's saying or fill in. It's like even when there's a bad phone connection, you're getting every other word. And it's like, what did you say? We don't need to do that. The closer we stay to God, the clearer his voice is. This is the time because God is everywhere. No matter where we go, no matter what we do, God is right there. He's omnipresent. He's always there. And again, where his presence is, his voice is right there. Are we hearing? Are our ears unstopped enough? Do we have the capacity? Do we have the humility to hear the vessel that he's using? And do we have the wherewithal and the knowledge to say, you might be saying some things that I don't like, but I'm going to hear you. And then the next step is obedience. That's a whole nother episode. Obeying God. Oh my, we could talk 5, 6, 7 days on that alone, where you hear from God. Many hear from God. Many hear from God. Very few obey, right? Many hear, we say, something told me in my spirit. That's God. We're going to give him credit. Something told me that was God. He's always talking to us. He desires to be in communion and conversation with us. Can you imagine that God, the God of the universe who created all of this, says, I want to talk to you. I want to be in communication and connection with you. These are the steps. And these are the reasons sometimes why we don't hear from God. I just want to come and share and encourage us to listen and hear, because we have to prepare ourselves before we can listen and hear. There are steps we have to take. There are things we have to admit. Some things we might have to uncover that doesn't feel good all the time, but it gets us one step closer to hearing God clearly, because that's the goal. We want to hear God clearly, not foggy or like half. No, clearly, so that we know exactly what he is saying. It has been so amazing to have this chat. Look, I know I'm not with you personally, but I feel like I'm talking right to you. We've had a conversation. If there's something that you heard that you love, give it a clap, give it a like, throw something in the chat, because this is something, this is a journey, this is a step that we all have to take. Again, I am Lilac Calandra. I have been the guest host for today on What's on Edigga's Mind. I am so honored to be here. And look, I have a podcast, and you can find me at Lilac Calandra. That's on YouTube and that's on Facebook. Season 2 will be starting up sometime next week. We go live every Thursday. I would love to have you. Love to continue this conversation. And if you want to reach out and say, you know what, I'm having some struggles or some challenges with focusing, and I need that mindfulness. I have the mindfulness business. It's Selah Mindset. edigga@gmail.com, and I'll make sure that Edigga has all the information. I'm taking clients where we're sitting and we're being mindful and we're being aware, because there's nothing worse or more dangerous than unregulated emotions in this time where we're not sitting in our emotions, because so much is going on. When we're able to sit and relax, acknowledge, and hear, that's when we can hear from God, when we've prepared ourselves, our own soil, to hear from God. Listen, you can do it. Just take a moment to hear from God. What is He saying to you? What does He want you to do? What is He trying to communicate? Let's turn our distractions down. Let's turn our noise down. Let's make sure we're tuned into the right frequency, whether you have to hit the knob or get the hanger, whatever you need to do to get that clarity, so we can make sure to hear God at all times. When God speaks, are we listening, and are we prepared to hear Him? Thank you so much. Please reach out to me if you want to communicate more. Blessings and peace to Edigga for having me on as the guest host. So amazing to be connected and just invited here. We are hearing from God. That's the move for 2022. We make a commitment to do everything in our power to hear from God. All right, so tune in next week to find what else is on Edigga's mind. Thank you and blessings to you.
Thank you for watching another great live broadcast on Charm City Direct TV. Make sure you head on over to YouTube, Facebook Live, and Twitter for more great content on Charm City Direct TV. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, follow, everything Charm City Direct TV.